When the United States military seized control of California during the Mexican-American War, it was inevitable that California would become a U.S. territory. That would mean immigration would likely increase as it had done over the 1840s. And with a growth of newcomers to the area, that would mean the demand for lumber would increase, especially since John Sutter wanted to continue his plan to build a town called Sutterville. Unlike Sutter's Fort, which is in the middle of Midtown Sacramento today, Sutterville was going to be located where William Land Park is today, near the Sacramento Zoo. That was an area outside of potential flooding, which is why Sutter's Fort was built on a hill. In February 1846, John Bidwell and Lansford Hastings surveyed the location for Sutterville, but there was no plans to further develop Sutterville for another 18 months. On August 27th, 1847, John Sutter wrote in the daily logbook at Sutter's Fort, now known as the New Helvetia Diary, made a contract and entered in partnership with Marshall, James Marshall, for a sawmill to be built on the American Fork. John Bidwell, the head clerk at the fort, stated in his memoirs, "I wrote the contract between Marshall and Sutter to build the mill. Sutter was to furnish the means, Marshall was to build and run the mill and have a share of the lumber for his compensation." Construction of the sawmill began soon after just Sutter and Marshall's contract. The location was determined a month prior when James Marshall, the head carpenter at the fort, and Nero, who was a Miwok guide and vaquero at the fort, found the location. The location was going to be built roughly 40 miles from Sutter's Fort in a place the Nisenan people called Cullumah, which means beautiful valley, on the land inhabited by the Yalesumney village. This is the area known today as Coloma on the South Fork of the American River. Why the sawmill 40 miles from the fort? Well, this is an example of a majority of the trees in this area. Quercus lobata, valley oak. They do not grow very tall like pine trees in the Sierra foothills. Also, there was already a lot of these trees being cleared out of this area to be used for other things, such as building materials, for firewood, the bark for tanning cowhides at the tannery, which was 1.5 miles north of here along the American River, and for charcoal in the blacksmith shop. Oak was in such a high demand that there was even people's roles and jobs here just to cut down trees to make charcoal. Clear cutting of oak in this area, coupled with the agricultural expansion on a massive scale, led to massive environmental change in this area, and many native groups to leave this area and other villages to be forced to rely on the fort for food and other resources for survival in the 1840s. The sawmill will only further change not only the Sacramento Valley, but California as a whole. Using a labor force of former U.S. Army soldiers from the Mormon Battalion and Nisenan native people from local villages such as the Yalesumney, James Marshall oversaw the construction of the sawmill that was nearing completion by mid-January 1848. James Marshall will find gold at the mill on January 24th, 1848, which will lead to the California Gold Rush.